Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is back from the break. So for those who are just joining us, this is the ongoing final webinar of the MuSES project, or Multi-Scale Energy Systems for Low Carbon Cities project, which took place for the last 4 years or so at the Future Cities Lab in Singapore, which is part of the Singapore ETH Center. So before the break, we heard from the principal investigators about the motivation behind the project, and then different sub-projects, namely the 3 different PhDs presented their research, and then the city energy analyst tool was presented. And then we took a break. So now after the break, what is going to happen, there will be satellite projects introduced. These are short 5-minute elevator pitches of projects that are somehow related to the main MuSES project, but have deal with different aspects of urban energy systems. So the first speaker is again the last speaker from before the break. It is Dr. Jimeno Fonseca. He was the project coordinator of the Multi-Scale Energy Systems for Low Carbon Cities project. And he is going to introduce to you now 2 different projects that are linked to the main project.
All right, thank you very much, Gabriel. So in this time, I put the hat of leader of one of these spin-off projects or satellite projects of MuSES called Connecting Power and District Energy Systems in Singapore, developed in collaboration with the Technical University of Munich and sponsored by the National Research Foundation of Singapore. So what we've tried to do with this project, basically the main motivation is to better understand the role of flexibility in the demand of energy in the future. And the concept of flexibility basically stands that we can shift basically different uses of energy, as you can see here, to different hours of the day, maybe during valley hours or during peak hours, to shift shape of the peaks of energy consumption or the valleys of energy consumption that can come in the future, especially those valleys that can come as the penetration of renewable energy sources such as solar become more apparent, right? So what we understand is that this use of flexibility in energy demand can also lead to some savings during operation. It's not too much clear what would be the effects on capital cost of future districts as well, the operational cost of future districts. Understanding that future districts will have an integration of perhaps district heating, cooling, and microgrids, who knows? So we would like to basically understand better that, and also see if we can create some framework or also small computational tools to help other people explore this type of alternative in the future. So the main research question that came about for this project was to understand if the cost of flexibility, which basically will change in the future, will this will actually be expensive? Will it cost more than not doing anything? Will actually decline the cost, or will just maintain them the same? We wanted to understand that, how it plays in future districts in the Singaporean context. So jumping next to the methods, we took basically just 3 main steps. The main step was to partner with the Urban Development Authority and also the Future Cities Laboratory to create future scenarios of development, very realistic and plausible scenarios, accounting for multiple types of land uses and demands. With this information, we obtain data about the future energy demand of these districts and how much that energy demand can be shifted. Different energy services can be shifted, for example, air conditioning. How much can that be shifted throughout the day? So we maintain comfort, but also can increase the flexibility of the system in terms of shaving off the peaks or filling in those valley hours of high penetration of PV. We did that with the city energy analyst, and also we created a new plugin for the city energy analyst to optimize the sizing, basically the connectivity, and basically at the end of the day, the cost of infrastructure for heat, for cooling, as well as for electricity in these future districts, which at the end gave us information for scenarios of non-flexibility and flexible demand, the type of equipment, the distribution network, the solar energy penetration, and the technology. Then we took all this information, we combined all those multiple scenarios of technology and urban design, and then assessed what would be the impact in terms of capital cost, operation, and maintenance. So the main findings of this project were that, surprisingly, the comparison between having buildings with the fixed loads as they operate today, or flexible building loads, basically move them across the day in an optimized way, could actually trend to increase the electricity consumption in a small percentage, about 0.2% every year. And this is only looking at space cooling, right, in terms of flexibility. And the reason is because the system gets a little bit sub-optimized once you start basically moving it out from the ideal operation. Next, what we understood that was much more surprising, I think, as a research finding, was to understand that while electricity costs will increase just 0.2% for this specific case on average, we will have a significant decrease on the capital cost for investment. And it has to do because we are able to shave off the peaks of electricity consumption ideally. And this, we believe, that can hopefully benefit especially investors of new low carbon districts, which can implement flexibility in their plans for how to operate the district. It will potentially not benefit utility operators because they will have to give some surcharge to the fee because of the increased cost of electricity, but potentially will benefit society. And this is what this 2.7% indicates. It will basically aim to reduce the annualized cost, basically all the investment operation cost split during the entire lifetime of buildings, of the infrastructure, which is a good indicator of the societal cost, basically, that we will have to incur, both manufacturers and installers as well as operators of this infrastructure. Still, the savings will be quite small, to be sincere, according to our results, about 2.7% annually. What is more interesting to see is this idea of understanding different type of occupancies. In this, during our studies, we noticed that offices are a very good candidate in terms of having this flexibility, because they're easier than in comparison to retail to actually shift the loads throughout the day and maintain a good status of comfort. And it has to do with their demand pattern, or the typical demand pattern exemplified here. All right, so what is the impact of this project? So we expect that it has impact for mainly 3 types of users. So we expect that by creating this new framework and plugin that was implemented in the City Energy Analyst tool at a certain point, we can also help other researchers to build on the state of the art faster, basically try our algorithms, improve them, or basically create something better. That's the goal always. The second thing that we say could create some impact, it has to do with new knowledge for the local energy authority, which would like a certain point understand the role of flexibility and flexible providers in future districts. And while we think that this project is not exhaustive, it still gives some indications of what would be the role if you plan ahead an entire district. And that's something that you could potentially do in Southeast Asia nowadays. And the third thing is that by understanding what is the role of different land use mixes and flexibility, we're able to also understand for entities such as planning authorities, what will be the impact of creating offices or retail on future districts, which could be operated under a scheme of flexible energy demands. All right, with that, I would like to conclude this elevator pitch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jimeno. At the moment, there are no questions from the attendees. So if any of the panelists have a question, or if any of the attendees would like to type their question into the Q&A, I suggest we wait for 1 or 2 minutes. So it seems none of the panelists have a specific question to this project.
Oh, I have one, okay. But maybe I missed the first 2 or 3 slides, so maybe you explained that. But Jimeno, can you highlight the challenges of kind of connecting those 2 different scales, large scale and district urban scale, in a sense, from an energy point of view and from a modeling point of view? Because it seems very straightforward to connect them. But I think it's not that easy. So maybe you can address a little bit the challenges of trying to bridge those 2 scales.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, it has to do a lot with this step 2, the methods. I think it has to do with the type of scales of analysis. Normally, for example, this idea of flexibility of demand will be explored at intervals of perhaps how the market operates, electricity market operates. Maybe 15 minutes would be actually very coarse. It could be even less. While for planning thermal systems that have high inertia, we also only consider time steps of 1 hour, for example, as much. That's already very detailed. So, I mean, it's not only the scale, I would call it, in terms of the sizes, but more the temporal scale. I think it has to do with approach. And a lot has to do with also the objectives. So, for example, when we plan for this, let's say the operation of buildings, and as we come from the building side and district heating and cooling, we're very concerned a lot with what have it, for example, systems that have low exergy losses, but also specifically that they address the comfort of users, right, at all times, while the planning and operation of the power grids had other objectives in mind that not necessarily align with those. So I think what we found through this research, actually the big topic of this research was to connect these 2 worlds. We found a common ground in understanding the flexibility and seeing if we can just shift the demand at certain points, accounting for the inertia of buildings. And that was, I think, finding that common ground was one challenge, and I hope many people can find other common ground to do studies in this regard, besides this. All right.
From my side, I would have a comment on this, because the link between the district system and the power demand is multi-scale in time. So the power demand is typically looking at seconds, while the thermal systems are very slow in dynamics. And something which is important there is that the understanding of the building dynamics allows to have the vision of forecasting the demands, defining the ranges that defines where the comfort is, and allowing to activate the capacities that are in the thermal system to be better or appearing in a much more flexible way on the power grids. And I think that there is a big asset there, because if we understand correctly the thermal side, then we can become a battery, which will be a free battery for the for the electrical system. And I think that's by doing those approaches where we combine the 2, then we are really going into the direction where, instead of having to buy batteries, we can better operate the system and have an inherent battery which is there, in fact.
Okay, thank you very much for these comments. So now there are a few questions here, and I think 2 of them, they mean the same. So I try to combine them. There is Matthias Sulzer, who asks, have you made electricity cost optimization compared to different markets, for meaning intraday, day ahead, ERL, etc.? And anonymous attendee asks, is the electricity price taken as a flat rate in this study? Is wholesale variation considered?
Great. Yeah, that's a good point. So what we did for the role of flexibility and also the operation of the flat load, we accounted for the wholesale variation, accounting that in the future we could have a liberalized market also in Singapore, different fees. I think something that was surprising to us is that we expected a little bit more variation and influence on the pricing. What we found out is that at that point when we did the study, we're talking about 2017, the prices of the wholesale market didn't change too much, and in some occasions they were even higher than even the retail market for really unknown conditions. We don't fully understand them, unfortunately. So yeah, it was considered basically in this aspect. We didn't obtain the results that we would have expected if we did it, for example, in Europe, where we would expect really interesting fees to do this, basically use of flexibility.
Okay, I think here we have to stop with answering the questions live because we have to move on. So there are a few more questions, and I suggest that later Jimeno will answer them in writing, or maybe we can come back to them during the Q&A.